Hello, everyone. My name is Gareth Harte. Excited to be here tonight. I am the founder and CEO of Telios. Oh, there we go. I'll move out of the way so you guys can see my picture up there. My background is in engineering. I've been an engineer for roughly about 15 years now. Started out working at eBay back in the day, and then worked in automotive at General Motors, and more recently at Live Oak Bank, serving as their engineering manager before starting Telios. Next slide, Jim. So what is Telios? At Telios, we are an AI company with a focus on privacy and security. Next slide, Jim. And so what we've built and kind of our main flagship product is something that we call an AI firewall. So a lot of you are probably very familiar with Chat GPT and large language models in general, and you've probably heard that it's not a very good idea to send your company information to it just because of the security implications. So we've pioneered what we believe is the world's first large language model AI firewall, and how that works is you send our firewall sensitive and PII information, and we strip that out. So if Jim Roberts sends us his tax returns, we strip out all of Jim's information and put in John Doe before sending it out to, let's say, Chat GPT models. And when it comes back with that John Doe information, we then put Jim's name back in as it comes down back into your platform and erase everything from memory so that Chat GPT is none the wiser of what information we just sent it.
Can we assume that maybe people don't know LLM?
Yeah, sorry. So large LLM stands for large language models. So if you use Chat GPT, that's essentially what an LLM or large language model is. I'll just refer to it as LLM going forward, just for brevity's sake. Yeah, so what is a large language model or an LLM? So Chat GPT, if you've used that, you've used an LLM. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with that, it's essentially a very powerful artificial intelligence that's designed to respond very similar to a human being. So it can come up with its own reasoning, its own thoughts that weren't in its training data. And it's what's in its training data, you can think of it as almost the entirety of the internet right now. There's trained on trillions of tokens, and they're pretty amazing. And the big ones that are out there right now are OpenAI, you've got Claude AI, and Palm 2, and Google's having a new one coming out next year. So at Telios, these are some business use cases that we've personally been dealing with in the field. And so one of the first ones we've came to in the fintech vertical is being able to take lending and loan documents from financial institutions like banks and using AI to scrape all of those documents and being able to run financial analysis on them. So think like generating credit spreads and financial reports, and all that kind of runs through our AI firewall. And we're able to take what an analyst, takes an analyst a couple days to do, we can do it in just a few minutes. Another thing that we've been seeing you can use these models for is customer service AI or agents. And so you can take all of your company's information that you've been using and conversing back and forth with customers and your customer support logs. You can train an AI that can sound exactly like how you talk with them, and you can automate that whole process. Tax returns. We partner with a company called Tax Titans. You can, instead of talking to your CPA, you can talk to an AI that just asks you what your business's gross returns were, and basically automate the whole tax process for you and make it a lot more simpler and streamlined. And then also another use case we've seen for using these things for is for technicians out in the field that are working on machinery. Instead of having to have a bunch of manuals they get a reference, they can just use Chat GPT as like an expert on whatever they're working on, telling them how to fix it.
Can we keep it quiet in the crowd, please? I'm hearing some voices up here. Thank you.
So another use case is on OpenAI's website is Morgan Stanley recently has been using a Chat GPT's GPT-4 model to ingest hundreds of thousands of documents for tens of thousands of their analysts to become essentially an expert in their financial advisory department. Next slide. But as powerful as these models are, they have some pretty big limitations that people may not be aware of. And one of these is what's called the context window. And in very simple terms, the context window here is essentially everything that you're sending to the model, and everything the model that it returns has to fit within a certain context window. And so right now, in relative terms, it's very small. So when an analyst wants to ingest 30 PDF files that are 30 pages long, we can't send all those PDF files and the contents of it to Chat GPT. We can only send a few pages at a time, and then its response that it gives is also limited. And so right now, so these context windows, GPT 3.5, which is what released earlier this year, is at a 16,000 token limit. GPT-4 can do 32,000, and Claude AI can do 100,000, which is kind of the biggest right now. And to give you some reference of what these tokens mean, the entire book of The Great Gatsby, which is about 208 pages, is roughly 72,000 tokens. So with Claude AI, you can give it the entire book of The Great Gatsby and ask any question about it, and within under a second, it'll tell you whatever answer you've asked it. A way to kind of represent this visually is we're looking at this picture here, and imagine this is a context window. I may think, okay, this looks like we're at the beach. I see palm trees, I see some tables and chairs and umbrellas. Maybe it's a restaurant at a beach, right? Well, next slide. Lo and behold, if I increase my context window, now I can see, oh, this is actually on top of a building in some city somewhere, right? So we can see as these context windows increase, as these models get bigger, it becomes exponentially more powerful with the amount of information that these large language models can hold. Next, please. Enter Microsoft's paper that just released about a month and a half ago called LongNet. And the token windows are about to grow to the size of 1 billion tokens. So it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around just how big this is, but you could record every second of your life for the past 30 years and ask an AI any question about your life, and it would return it to you in under a couple seconds. Next slide. So when we take a billion token context window into this picture, if we zoom out, this red square here is what we're looking at. Now we can see, oh, this context size is now super huge. We're looking at the New York City, and you could ask the model, how many windows are on these buildings? How many people would you estimate live in this city? And it would be able to tell you almost instantly. How many here have heard of Llama? Any show of hands? Okay, awesome. Okay, that's way more than I would have expected. So Meta AI or Facebook released an open source model called Llama 1 earlier this year, and they recently came out with Llama 2. Next slide, Jim. And so these models are open source, and I believe this is where the future of these models, natural language processors and large language models are moving, is to the open source. And so this Llama 2 model, as you can see here, at a 70 billion parameter model is almost as good as GPT-4, which is OpenAI's, this $10 billion company's model. And so something we've been experimenting with Telios is building custom models for industry-specific use cases and businesses where you actually own your own model on your own computer, on your own hardware, and you don't even need to use these big companies like OpenAI anymore. The other thing that we're seeing with the future of these models is in the next year we're going to be seeing what's called multimodal GPT. And what this means is AI right now can just do text, but it's going to have vision. So you can send it pictures, and it will know exactly what's in these pictures. So I can send it a picture of this lasagna dish. It knows it's lasagna. It can give me the recipe to make it. It can tell me anything about what's in a picture. Next slide. Another thing I gave it was the WALL-E poster. It knew it was WALL-E. It knew the studio that produced it. This is something we're going to start seeing in the future. And by the way, this isn't using OpenAI. This is a local model that can do all this right now. So these models are getting very, very powerful. This is only a 10-minute presentation, but there are way more things. I could talk about this probably 2 hours. So I'm happy to stay afterwards and answer any questions. But thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Why don't you ask?
Yeah.
While we switch out on the laptop.
Sure. Any questions? Yes, in the back.
Hey, Gareth. Thank you for the presentation. I'm very, very interested in the intersection is your solution aligned to any sort of standards like NIST, HIPAA, or anything like that? Because I find that a lot of organizations align to those models to kind of guide them from a security standpoint.
Yeah, excellent question. So having worked in banking in the fintech industry, there's a certification called SOX 2, which is pretty standard, and for healthcare has HIPAA. So when we went to build our solution, and when we're thinking about local large language models, we build these with the idea that everything, all the information can run on your own hardware within your own company's cloud. And so that's kind of the gold standard for security, right? And not having any information or private or secure data leaving that cloud. And that's kind of what our focus is right now, moving forward with these local models and with our AI firewall.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about your services specifically, and are you fine-tuning models, or can you describe a little bit more about your firewall, and connected to that, how are you adjusting to the incredible increase of release of models?
Yeah. Yeah, so our model is a proprietary model. It's a local large language model that looks for PII. That can be people's names, addresses, phone numbers. We can even strip out things that aren't personal information, like names of companies, machine numbers, kind of whatever you want. And so we've done some fine tuning there. That AI model could run on your own infrastructure. But if you're kind of a bigger company, you want to just go full ham and have your own large language model, we work with you to train that either off your own data. We show you how to put data in it, and we can show you how to run that on your own hardware and charge licensing for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nathan.
When you compare a local model to something like OpenAI, I guess how have you seen the performance in terms of accuracy and response given what it is?
Yeah, it's actually what really surprised me when we built our own local models is they actually work better than GPT-4. Yes, so GPT-4, for those of you that may not know, is not one model. It's roughly 16 separate models that they call network of experts, and they have one model that figures out which one it needs to use. And the parameter size of those models is roughly the same size as these open source ones coming out. So when you put your own company information into it, it actually performs better than GPT-4's, because GPT-4 doesn't know anything about your company, right? This information was never released out onto the internet. GPT-4 is just a very broad general model. So this can perform much better than what you would get using what the public is using right now. All right. I guess maybe we can take one more question while they're, yes?
So the whole point of your AI is to protect security. So you scrub the data, all personal data, and then you export it to like Chat GPT or whatever, bring it back in. Where is that data that you strip being stored and then you re-import?
So it's all stored in memory, so it's a fire and forget. So your PII goes into the memory of the AI firewall, and it strips out what it needs to and waits for the response to come back from any large language model. It doesn't have to be OpenAI. And once it comes back, it figures out where it needs to replace the real information. And then after it's done doing that, it just erases it for memory. So there's like no trail, essentially.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you.